Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point AFR Talk. Great to have you in the conversation. I just want to close the loop completely on that story I talked about over the last half hour about the impact of Protestant Christianity on democracy around the world. This researcher, University of North Carolina, not a part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, did exhaustive, extensive research into the history of civilizations and democracies around the world and discovered that Protestant Christianity has been the single greatest factor in ensuring the health of nations, the single greatest factor on behalf of democratic movements in the history of civilization. You know, and he made the point that, look, a lot of these, they didn't set out to be social reformers. They just set out in the name of Christ to love other people, to care about other people. When they saw that these people had been wronged, they wanted to step in and make it right. They wanted them to be able to read. They wanted mass education. And this was all an outgrowth of what Martin Luther brought back to the church in the Reformation, the priesthood of all believers. Because if all souls are equal before God, then everyone ought to have access to the Bible in their own language. And this article, Christianity Today, goes on to say that over a dozen studies have confirmed Woodbury's findings. So this is just not an outlier of a study. It's been confirmed by over a dozen studies that have examined and evaluated what he has done. Let's see, anything else I want to highlight out of this. Woodbury says if you pull out a map, you point to any place where conversionary Protestants were active in the past, you'll typically find more printed books and more schools per capita. You'll find, too, that in Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, most of the early nationalists who led their countries to independence graduated from Protestant mission schools. And then the Christianity Today interviewed a scholar who says, look, I'm not even a religious guy, but I am overwhelmed by the evidence that Woodbury has brought together. This is amazing. He says they, referring to Protestant missionaries, left a long legacy. It changed my views. So he had grew up with the same builds that Christianity has been a blight on the nations, been a source of oppression and repression and racism and colonialism. And the research indicates exactly the opposite. And even a secular scholar completely impressed with the findings of this research. So be proud of the fact that our religious tradition has had the greatest impact for good in the history of the planet. Now, I want to turn a little bit of attention to the issue of healthcare. Let's grab a couple of sound bites if we can in this segment. Let's grab sound bite number 3 if we can, Rob. This is Charles Krauthammer, and you might have heard this. I had it in the stack yesterday. I didn't have a chance to get to it, but Target has canceled health insurance policies for its part-time employees. Now, they had this song and dance about how this is really in their best interest. We're just doing it because we care for them. We can't give them subsidies. If they go to the exchange, they'll be able to get subsidies. But in reality, as healthcare, Target, it's to their benefit to just dump their employees into these exchanges. Home Depot has done this, and another major chain has done the same thing just recently. It escapes me right off the top of my head. But, this is something that we predicted would happen, that these large companies would look, hey, you have to have entire HR departments just to handle the healthcare insurance for your employees and process all of that and make the payroll deductions and all of that kind of stuff. And large insurance companies are going to say, look, why are we messing with this? President Obama is out there promising that our people can get cheaper insurance than they can get from us. It'll be more complete. It'll be better. It'll be Cadillac version compared to the junk stuff that we're selling them right now. There's absolutely no reason for these larger companies not to just dump people willy-nilly into Obamacare. And Charles Krauthammer, clip 3, Target was the other one. I mentioned Target. I mentioned Home Depot is another one. I'll find it in a minute. Anyway, Charles Krauthammer saying, hey, this may be more than just accidental.
If I could add one point on Target canceling the health insurance for part-time workers. They are spinning it as we have to do that because otherwise they won't be able to acquire subsidies on the exchanges. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that so? Why aren't the part workers allowed a choice? Stay with Target, stay with your doctor, or go on the exchanges and get a subsidy. So what it tells you is the bill was written deliberately to force employers to kick people off their plans, so that would be the only way to get the subsidies. In fact, what it tells you is that none of this is an unintended side effect of the creation of Obamacare. The purpose of Obamacare was to destroy the relationship between the employer and the employee in getting health care, and that's exactly why millions of people are being tossed off, and millions more will be as the larger as the larger employers start tossing people off later in the year.
Now, what Protestant is referring to there, all of this chaos, all of this confusion, all of this misery is only a small slice of the market. The individual market, I think, is something like 15, 16% of the total insurance market, and that's all we're dealing with here. And remember, if President Obama had not unconstitutionally, unlawfully, unethically, and illegally suspended the employer mandate, we would have not just 15% of the population affected, but close to 70%, because that's how many get insurance through their employers. Well, that's going to kick in 2014. So you're going to start seeing mass numbers of people dumped into Obamacare because the employers are not going to be able to afford insurance. As Trader Joe's, by the way, was the other large company that also has suspended health care for their employees. Now, Rob, drop down to clip number 9. We'll have to play the other one on the other side of the break. But, people have to go to the Obamacare website, and we've talked about the security problems with Obamacare. Here is a guy by the name of David Kennedy. He is the CEO of Trusted Sec. This is a company that specializes in internet security, and he talks about how secure the Obamacare website is. Remember, everybody's got to go to the Obamacare website. Trader Joe's, Home Depot, Target, you got to go to the Obamacare website to get your insurance. No other place to get it. Here's what he had to say about the security on the website.
Well, when we testified in front of Congress in November, Chris, what we learned was that, they had rushed through what we call the software development lifecycle, where they actually build the application. And so when you do that, security doesn't really get integrated into it. And what happened with the rocky launch in October is they slapped a bunch of servers in trying to fix the website just to keep it up and running so that people could actually go and use it. But the problem is they still didn't embed any security into it. So when you have another, few hundred developers actually writing code to try to keep the site up and running, and you increase the line count of code, it increases more and more exposures, and that's what we saw here over the period of time, and that's what we testified on. It's much worse than what we saw back in November.
So it's worse now. The security is actually worse than it was in November, and they talked about how this tech surge, we were going to fix all these problems. We're going to get on it. We're going to devote all our resources. We're going to get this straightened out. It's going to be smooth. And David Kennedy saying, look, the security is worse now than it ever has been. And I think it'll be in the second soundbite. But anyway, he talked in this interview about the fact that it took him 4 minutes to hack the Obamacare website, get 70,000 accounts in the private information back in 2.